Hey guys, it's me again. Welcome back to Within the Good Books, and today I'm here to review Black Beauty. First off, I'm just going to start generally about the book. I didn't love it necessarily, but it was pretty good, and the other portion is when I look back onto it after I've read it, there was a lot of historical significance with changes that the book made, and for that reason I think it's important to read if you haven't, and I mean if you choose not to, it's your choice, but I would give it a read, even though during the book, I definitely wasn't the most in tune with it, the story, and didn't love it too much, and I can't say I didn't finish it just because, but at the end of the day, I was glad that I read it, and so I would suggest to the people who haven't read it yet. Again, I would ask if you guys have not read the book to stop watching the video, because I will be talking about events in the book, and I will be ruining the book a bit for you. So you can pick it up and read it again. It's another short one. It's like 200 pages, and it's meant for children, so you should be able to finish that within a day or so time, and then you can come back and enjoy the video, and love to hear your comments. So just a quick recap again. So the book is Black Beauty by Sewell, and she actually wrote it when she was 19, which is probably the most impressive part. And my favorite part of the book was when Beauty was in the care of the bakers. The reason why it's my favorite part is because Beauty had good care elsewhere, and terrible care by these prestigious owners. When he went with the Baker family, I mean, they weren't very well off, and Jerry was a cab driver, and they didn't need all those luxuries in order to have a very, a nice relationship, a happy family. Even after, as he was going lower and lower down the totem pole because of his age and his wear, he still found some good people along the way. Now, my least favorite part of the book, which is actually what makes the book kind of importance, is the mistreat of the horses. So you had the Baron rings, you had when they cut I think Sir Oliver's tail, and all these other things in order to appear pleasant, or when they worked them too hard. And the one that bothers me the most probably is when Lady Anne always asked to tighten their bearing rings even more, and to the point when it wasn't even close. It was a status thing, but I find it even worse than when they're overworked, the horses, because it had nothing to do with potential gain of the situation other than status. Now, my favorite characters, well, first of all, obviously Black Beauty had to be my favorite character, and if it wasn't, I mean, that would be for an actually atrocious read. But Jerry also is one of my favorite characters, so the reason why I like Beauty is pretty much trivial, it's just the main character and stuff like that, but I also liked how, regardless of who the trainer was, how he was being held, he always kept a personal pride in his work, and I found that was something that I would like to have pride in as well, so I found a nice relatability between that, and why I like Jerry should be pretty obvious as well. He's just, a really good stand-up guy, works really hard, and he cares for his family, and even though he's not wealthy, he has a pretty happy life. And the other part too is he works excessively hard. I mean, in the story he works too hard to a fault where he gets sick and almost dies, but I think that characteristic alone in a less risky environment is very important to have. My least favorite character is Nicholas Skinner, and he's kind of the kingpin of the poor cabs, and he forces the cabs to work extremely hard and overwork their horses, and the reason why he's my least favorite is the opposite, rather, of why I like Jerry, and that's because he doesn't care for his employees, he doesn't care for the horses, he doesn't care for anything, he just cares about that bottom line, and that's kind of the businessman that I hate in this world. But it's actually ironic because a lot of the way the businesses are evolving now, the better businesses actually care about their employees and therefore get better production, a better product out of it. So it's kind of like a backwards way of thinking with that, I guess. And also just his general lack of empathy. Oh, one of my favorite parts, we're going to talk about my favorite quotes, and I have actually 3 from this book, which is surprising because I thought there wasn't going to be at first, but it turns out there's some pretty good lines in here. The first one here is right after kind of Beauty saves them from crashing into the river, going over the bridge, and it goes, "The master said, God has given men reason by which they could find out things for themselves, but he has given animals knowledge which does not depend on reason, and which was much more prompt and perfect in its way, and by which they had often saved the lives of men." So I always kind of liked this idea of there's something more to life than black and white, and that kind of embodies it well. I mean, there's also that, there's that famous quote in one of Shakespeare's plays about, to Horatio, about how there's more on heaven and earth than as taught in his philosophies. And I think that's kind of along the same thought, and I've always liked that. I always found that intriguing because I do have a science background, but it's always kind of a question of how can I scientifically explain something as from like quantification of relationships that people have, etc., and instincts and that stuff. You know, you can't explain that well. To an extent, we'll just never understand it. So you kind of just have to accept it and trust yourself. This is my favorite quote, and this is the one that I definitely, when I was reading, I stopped and said, well, that's a good line, so here it is. My doctrine is this, that if we see cruelty or wrong that we have the power to stop and do nothing, we make ourselves sharers in the guilt. That's a great line. I mean, it really does embody the bystanders kind of, when they don't do anything, they feel like they're not, they feel good about themselves almost because they're not the one doing the actions, and they would never do that, but they never do anything to prevent the action itself or stop it. And that's one thing I think I take away from this book. You know, it's, you should really stand up for what you believe in, regardless of how it might look or how other people might look at you. And I also like how his standard has gone to the point where if he doesn't do it, then he's actually doing something wrong. I thought that was good as well. So the last one here is the lady when Beauty was trying to haul a lot of weight and a load up a hill with his bearing reins on, and the lady stopped and took his bearing reins off and showed how he could now pull the load. And then after the conversation, she said this: "We have no right to distress of God's creatures without a very good reason. We call them dumb animals, and so they are, for they cannot tell us how they feel, but they do not suffer less because they have no words." It's a bit unfair that we, you know, judge animals for being stupid because they can't communicate or they can't compete with us in that sense. And what I like about this quote, though, is I try to do a parallel to kind of our society and how people who have not had the same opportunities will think they're stupid because they're not as educated. You always get this too when you have someone with a foreign language. It's not that they're stupid or anything of that matter. They've had just a different path in life. So now just some general topics I'd like to talk about with the book. So some cool things that Anna Sewell does in the novel, actually, she chooses her names, so their family names, that are very kind of in line with how the person is. So, for example, she uses Thorogood. She uses other names like as equivalent of a green would be to someone who's new. And I know it's not necessarily clever or anything in that aspect, but I did find it interesting, and I only discovered that when I looked into the book and read some stuff online. So I thought that was kind of an interesting perspective. Another general comment I'd like to make about the book is I love how a fictional novel actually makes a big impact on society, and how a story that's not even true made change in the world. And I think that's kind of interesting, because I think a lot of people think that you can't learn anything from fiction, and it really shaped the world in terms of animal cruelty and towards horses. So there's a couple critiques on the book. One of them is how alcoholism is talked about in the novel a lot, and also by the horses, right? Because that's the dialogue that we hear the most. And one, I guess, critique that I wish would have happened is that if the horses never talked about actual alcoholism, and instead the reader was forced to come to this conclusion just based on the behavioral changes the horses see, but they don't actually know why. And then I think it would be a little more fulfilling if I came to the conclusion myself as opposed to the horses talking about it. So that's about it. Thanks for watching. That's one more off my list. Actually, I've decided for my next book to read is Jane Eyre, and I didn't realize when I picked it up that it had this funky kind of purple color, so it might be looked at a little weird in public if I'm reading it, but yeah, so in 2 weeks I'm going to try to read this one, and it's definitely by far longer than the other two books. Alright, thanks for having me.